All right, so this video is for biology and it's chapter 2 and section 3. Section 3 is about the cycles in ecosystems that will cycle important compounds, things that all living things need. So the word here, natural processes cycle matter and nutrients through the biosphere. And I put this recycle symbol because that's important to remember when we say cycle. Things are maybe change forms, go different places, but nothing is ever lost. So a reminder, matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. So matter cycles as well as nutrients. A nutrient is a chemical that an organism, living things, need to obtain from its environment in order to survive. So the word here is environment. So we need to obtain nutrients in our diet for survival. So do other living things. These processes that recycle this matter, these nutrients involve living organisms and then physical processes. Think like industrial waste or runoff. Think volcanoes or lightning. Those are natural things and they cycle things too. And all of the cycles are termed what's known as biogeochemical cycle. So the exchange of matter through the biosphere is termed biogeochemical. I'll write that word down for you here. Okay. So these biogeochemical cycles, a few examples that you need to know the gist of, and I'll tell you what you need to know, is the water cycle. And I'm sure you've studied this before, how water can evaporate from the water in the soil and other organisms, go into the atmosphere, and it returns to the atmosphere or to the ground in the form of precipitation. And fresh water that we drink, we rely on to survive. But only 3%, and that's the blank here, of water on Earth is considered fresh water. And what this picture shows is a water cycle, and all the arrows represent the movement of the water molecules. Trees actually give off water in a process called transpiration that goes into the air. Like I said before, precipitation is when it rains or snows. Water can be found in bodies of water, obviously, and then also in groundwater, called an aquifer. And it all, changes forms. We don't lose it. It just changes forms, the water cycle. Carbon and oxygen cycles are mixed. Carbon and oxygen are essential for life. Essential is the word here. And these two nutrients relatively cycle quickly. They cycle quickly in the atmosphere through living organisms. So here's an example of, here's a picture of the cycle. Let's look at this animal here. In plants, both plants and animals actually exhale carbon dioxide or release oxygen. Okay, so respiration puts those things into the atmosphere. Extra carbon dioxide can also go into the atmosphere from like industry, plants. Combustion of fuels puts extra carbon dioxide into the air. So this is showing the carbon cycle, what this picture is showing. All right, so there's other processes that happen that cycle carbon and thus oxygen. Write down long term. Carbon cycle is more of a long-term cycle when you bury dead matter. So as you can see down here, when let's say this animal dies and the plants die, eventually what will happen is those organisms will turn into fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal. But that process, and that's what this is referring to, takes a long time. The nitrogen cycle Okay, so the gases in our atmosphere, nitrogen gas, oxygen, water vapor, carbon dioxide. If we were to look at the overall percentage, most of the gas is nitrogen gas. But why can't we inhale nitrogen gas, or why don't we? The gas in the atmosphere isn't in a usable form for us, and it's not a usable form for living things. So nitrogen has to be converted into a usable form, and that's the word here, usable, by plants. And plants do this work, and the process is called nitrogen fixation. So what you see here, the atmospheric nitrogen is put into the ground, and you can see an arrows here right there, in the process called nitrogen fixation. And bacteria, underlying bacteria or star, actually do this. Little microorganisms in the soil take the nitrogen from the atmosphere and fix it in the soil. Side note, electrical storms, lightning also can do that. When lightning strikes the ground, it's actually taking nitrogen from the atmosphere and putting it into the soil. Now, usable form, meaning plants then use that nitrogen in the soil to grow. We eat the plants, we get the nitrogen. The opposite of that is called denitrification, where again, another type of bacteria, or bacteria in general, convert the nitrogen back into nitrogen gas. So denitrification, right here, denitrification bacteria take the nitrates out of the soil and put it in the atmosphere. So again, the element nitrogen is cycled, not lost, not gained, but changes forms. The phosphorus cycle is the last cycle we're going to talk about for this class. Phosphorus, again, is an element that's essential for growth and development of organisms. We need it in our DNA. We need it in our energy that we use to do things. So phosphorus quickly cycles as phosphates in sediments, and also plants and consumers. And it's a little more long term in the case of when we're looking at rocks. When rocks get weathered or eroded, so the word here is rocks, it puts phosphorus into the cycle, and that's more of a long-term process. Quickly through sediments, plants, and consumers like ourselves. More slowly it moves through eroded rock. And phosphorus can be a pollutant in larger numbers in the water. And we'll talk more about that later when we talk about pollution. So that's the end of biogeochemicals, the cycles. They're important to keep us functioning in the ecosystem.